Sometimes I just sit in one couch, and I think it was a man's hand go up to Amanda's hand, same shirt. I think it was my dad. I think it was my dad.
Was I abused when I was a kid? If someone had asked me that before I was 37 years old, I would have said no.
Mary Knight was a social worker herself, and she's telling her story to try and break the abuse cycle for others.
Oh, we have a family of deer that started living here before we did. And
beautiful surroundings. The one thing her life now and her life then have in common.
my sister and I would go just exploring through the woods, and that was kind of our getaway.
Otherwise, this Oregon City filmmaker's early life was something out of a horror film.
I had an extremely abusive childhood. I was prostituted as a child. My parents produced child pornography and used me as in it.
Mary Knight didn't even remember that abuse until she was in her 30s.
What was your first reaction to finding out I was doing this project?
I thought, who the heck is she that would do something like this?
Did it make you not trust me?
It did. Because I thought, well, what if you'd already made your decision that what you'd recovered were false memories? So I thought you were a false memory person, and I was very, very careful about you.
Just in simple terms, what do you think recovered memory is?
Recovered memory is a child undergoes trauma. They're at risk if they tell anyone. So they must find a way to forget it. So they do. And they forget it until the time is safe for them to recall it.
Who is Dr. Elizabeth Loftus?
Well, she's always introduced by the media as a world-renowned memory researcher. And she's a professor of cognitive psychology. She's also associated with the law department at UC Irvine.
These claims about repression are claims that, horrible brutalization is banished into the unconscious by some process that's beyond ordinary forgetting and remembering. And then, years later, you, according to the theory, go through some kind of therapy that lifts this veil of repression and makes you aware of the experiences. And it's that kind of claim that I just haven't seen any real credible scientific support for. Uh-huh. It's a kind of a strange experience for me because, often the individuals who think they were abused or think they have repressed memories of abuse, they don't particularly want to talk to me.
Uh-huh.
And they don't want to have their memories questioned. And they are typically, angry at people. This is a new experience.
For both of us.
For both of us.
If I'm willing to do a documentary entitled, Am I Crazy? My journey to determine if my memories are true, then one thing I have to do is truly question my memories. I have to commit to myself, I'm going to question it. And to me, the best way to do it is to talk to people who don't believe memories like mine exist.
I don't know anything about your situation.
I'm a survivor of extreme abuse, of ritualistic abuse. I was molested by a number of family member and non-family members. And I told you I made cookies for you with my mom's recipe, but she sexually abused me.
Your mother. So how old were you?
It was through a long period of my childhood.
But like what to what? I mean, starting what age?
Young to through teenage years, yeah. So it was for a long time, yeah.
And then what happened?
Then I had relatives who remembered, and I went to counseling. And I remembered
So then how old were you roughly then? at
about
this point?
37. Yeah.
And how do you know it really happened?
The real reason I know is that I just have a really spiritual connection, and that's just what I know to be true in my deepest self. But then also I do have 5 relatives with similar memories. Right. I had hoped they would be interviewed for the documentary. It looks like none of them will be, but I'm still hopeful about one. But really, in a way, it's okay that they don't, because most survivors don't have that kind of external corroboration. And I want this documentary to say to survivors, you're okay. And you don't need something external, because, I mean, that's really part of the abuse, was that your thoughts and your feelings and your perceptions are not enough. And so then, if in therapy or in recovery we say, well, you need external corroboration, what message is that? If you say something you don't want to use, I'm just so glad you're willing to do it at all. And really, the first thing, I mean, the answer to this question, I mean, basically, you're my cousin.
Yes, we're cousins.
So I'm wondering if we have memories in common. And I was raped by our grandfather. Do you have a memory like that?
Yes. Yes, I do. I believe we came from a family that engaged in generational abuse, and that I was abused by multiple family members.
My father, do you think he was... My father abused me. My father abused me by being... allowed me to be abused by other people.
Yes.
Did that happen
Yes.
to you?
I mean, he was not someone who physically touched me, but almost coaching others. Somehow taking pictures as well.
So this would be child pornography.
I have no idea what he was doing with what he was taking, but yes. Yes. Encouraging others to be involved in sexual acts with me and filming them, so yeah.
Okay, that definitely happened to me.
So now I basically have 5 minutes of your story, and your. Well, I hope this won't be offensive, but your claims about what other people said, but I haven't heard those claims from them, and so I don't know. So I can't be sure if when you tell me, and and I have an aunt, and she says she was abused, or did the aunt really say that, and did the aunt really mean that, or did the aunt really mean something else, like emotional abuse rather than sexual or ritual abuse. So without having so little data, it's really hard for me to know what to think.
But if they did say that, I mean, I know that they did.
Yeah.
I mean, you don't know it, I understand that, but I know that they did. So you're asking, like, why do I believe it? Well, that's one of the reasons. And so then after I would remember something, I'd call one of them, and they'd, have a similar memory to a lot of my memories. I traveled to Florida to interview Eleanor Goldstein, the author of 3 books disputing recovered memories. My husband Jerry came with me as my camera person. Eleanor is about the same age my mother would have been. She invited us to stay with her, and I thought about doing it. Instead, we went to the hotel and figured out how to use sound equipment. So why don't you tell me how beautiful I am or something so I can see how the cameraman sounds in it.
Don't push your luck.
Okay, that's a wonderful response.
Confabulation is a mixture of fact and fantasy to create a new memory. We do that every day. We mix our memories up with other people's memories. So we've learned that memory is very, very pliable. And you can get people to believe anything that you want them to believe if you use the right techniques. How did you get your memories back? Did you get it back spontaneously? Did you get it back with the aid of a therapist who used some suggestibility?
That was my greatest fear in going was, I was like, they'll ask me some question that I'd never thought of before. And then I'll go, maybe my memories aren't true. The questions they asked, I'd already asked myself. I was an investigator when I remembered my abuse. I'd done at that point 200 or 300 custody evaluations. I placed 100 kids in adoptive homes. And you always, of course, you investigate those homes very carefully. And I know how to do investigations. And so then when I remembered my own abuse, I treated it like, I could let myself just go, if I were the investigator on this case, what questions would I ask? And I asked myself all those questions. I was seeing a counselor, and I had 5 hypnosis sessions. I don't have those with me, but I have, I have.
Then how do you know for sure that these memories are true if you had 5 hypnosis sessions?
I asked for hypnotherapy, and I asked for it because I had young kids, and I had reasons to suspect relatives. And I needed to know. I need to know who to protect my kids from.
Oh, sure.
I transcribed the hypnosis tapes, but listening to those and transcribing them, that was an excellent psychologist. She did not ask any leading questions. I think that survivors, and I tried to do this, I wouldn't go on antidepressants for a long time because it's like, my parents are more likely to believe my memories are true, and then they'll go get treatment if I don't, do anything wrong. No. That's not why they don't believe you.
No, it's not.
Why do you believe me?
Because I know you.
When did you start believing me?
Several months after I met you.
And what made the difference?
I didn't disbelieve you in the beginning. I just had to get to know you better.
What made the difference with believing me?
Nothing in particular. I just got to know you.
Bullshit memories that come back like that out of the blue. I spoke in Canada at Simon Fraser University, dentist, and all of a sudden 20 years later some patient comes and says, I remember 20 years ago you abused me when I was in the dental chair, but I forgot about it until I went to therapy. Now I remember.
I was wondering why you interviewed her.
And
I know she's written a couple of books.
She's written 3 books. She's written 3 books, but she's not a memory expert.
No,
she's not, she's not a mental health expert. But I interviewed her because I was told that there was someone who had firsthand information that Marilyn's memories were not true.
And now, Miss America of 1958.
From Atlantic City, New Jersey.
Miss Colorado!
It would not be possible to know or understand me unless you knew about the unending sexual violations I endured as a child and as a teenager. The trauma was so severe, I did what many children do in order to survive. I split, or to use the psychiatric word, I dissociated. I split into what I call a day child and a night child. As difficult as this is for most people to believe or understand, until I was 24, I, the day child, had no conscious knowledge of the night child.
All I'm saying is I knew this very beautiful, intact, happy-go-lucky, smart woman.
Know her?
Well, not very well, except that I was in a class with her every single day.
But I had been told that she had firsthand information that Marilyn's memories weren't true. And so I had questions like, well, tell me about the time she confided in you. They took a class together in college. She has no other information about her.
Did she tell you that Marilyn's memories were false? Or was
Yeah.
that... Oh, she did.
Well, she told me that they were very, that
Questionable?
She will allow me to use some footage
What footage?
of Marilyn from a talk she gave.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Interesting,
I don't
because
know.
she doesn't want to be confronted. She has a prepared speech, and that's what she's willing to acknowledge, but she doesn't want to be confronted, apparently.
Oh, I really get to talk to her. I'm nervous and excited.
Hello.
Hi, Marilyn. It's Mary Knight.
It's nice to hear your voice.
It's good to hear your voice. I just have so much respect for you. I remembered in my abuse in '93, and it was in like a year later, my counselor gave me this video of a presentation you did. And so I took it home. I was sitting in my living room listening to your presentation. And of course, when you say, if you're comfortable, if you're a survivor and you're comfortable standing, you may do so now. I stood up in my living room.
Oh, I love that.
And I thought, someday I want to do what Marilyn's doing for incest survivors, I want to do for survivors of ritual abuse. So,
And that's what you're doing.
It is.
I ask survivors to stand for several reasons. One is because I'm always hoping there are some of you here today who are as empowered as I finally am. It took me 53 years to get rid of shame, but I don't have an ounce of shame today. I'm so very proud of who I am. And I hope that there are others of you here today who have also worked through the shame.
Do you think survivors need to go public in order to heal from the shame?
Oh, I do not. No, I think each of us is on a different journey. Some people will stand publicly without shame. As long as survivors work through the shame, if the reason they don't stand is because of shame, then that's a problem for me.
What about the former Miss America, Marilyn Van de Beer?
She went through a tremendous amount of all kinds of different therapy before, highly suggestive therapy, before she told the story of abuse.
So that's not what it was reported in People magazine. Is there some other way you have
Yeah,
that information?
I've watched lectures that she's given,
and in lectures she said what?
She's talked about the massive amount of therapy.
But that was after remembering.
I'm not sure of that, no.
What she has said publicly that she remembered. I mean, I have the People magazine here.
Yeah,
article.
but I've read a whole bunch more than just People magazine about that case. It's a very suspicious case.
And tell me more why you said that.
I just believe that she had lots and lots of different kinds of therapy, and so we can't know whether what she ultimately came up with is an actual memory or is a product of suggestive therapy. We just don't know.
How old were you when you first had therapy?
My memories came up when I was 24. I did not start therapy until I was 39.
You think she's not telling the truth?
I don't know, but I've heard about a whole bunch of other therapy. And
afterwards?
No, I'm not sure of that. I'm not sure of that.
So your concern is what therapy she had before 1960?
I just don't know that those memories are real.
And then her sister, of course, always remembered sexual abuse.
Well, we
by
don't
her
know
father.
exactly what her sister remembered, though. I've never read exactly, what the sister remembered. The sister supposedly felt there was some kind of abuse, but I don't know what it is.
Sexual abuse.
That the sister was remembering. So I just don't know.
So that could be a corroborated case if the sister has continuous memory of the memory that Marilyn has.
Well, I don't know that. Yeah, well, we'd have to know a whole lot more. And I only get to know in depth about the cases that I work on, and the rest of them, it's kind of newspaper knowledge.
So I had a press conference, and the next day it was on the front page of the Rocky Mountain News and the Denver Post. I got a phone call. They're calling your sisters. I called my sister Gwen in San Francisco, and I said, if you want to go public with this, do it in California, because we're never going to get off the front pages in Denver. The next morning, the third day, it was on the front page of the paper again with my sister's story and my picture. I waited until our daughter awakened. She had just come home from her sophomore year in college. She woke up and I said to Larry and Jennifer, I have to get out of here. I have to go. So we put on our sweats and we went to the high school track. We were jogging around the track and the woman with her 2 dogs came. We always said hello. She stopped me. And she said, Marilyn, we're so proud of what you're doing. And I'm so grateful your sister came forward this morning. I had been upset about that. And I said, really, why? And she said, because yesterday, on our most popular radio talk show, people were calling in and saying, why should we believe her? Now that your sister has come forward, they will have to believe you. I was stunned. I looked at her and I said, if people are not going to believe 53-year-old me, then who is going to believe a child?
There were a few things that I have always remembered that I think were not right. I remember my dad saying that he was sexually attracted to me.
How old were you when he said that?
I don't think it matters how old someone is. It's
No,
just
but I
wrong.
mean, oh yeah, some things you just take as a joke. People say stupid things.
That's not something I think a father would usually joke about, that he's sexually attracted to his daughter.
What did you say? How old were you? You don't remember?
Yeah, I do. I remember I was about 13. You sent that email and said, this is Eleanor's daughter, and she's a survivor. I'm like, wow.
I think it's pretty courageous of her after so many years.
Oh, I know. So you're sure you're a survivor of abuse?
Oh, yeah. As sure as I can be, without having, footage of it.
Yes.
And I have to trust that. Otherwise, where does it leave me?
Do you remember actually telling your parents about it?
Yeah, because I didn't know they had anything to do with it.
Uh-huh.
The first memory that came up, I just remembered babysitters.
How did your interest in the subject begin?
So I was doing all this research, and my function was to find out information, and I was sitting at my desk one day, and there was an article, and it said, parents claim to be falsely accused.
So that was a lie.
Absolutely, the deeper truth is that she had a daughter, who was having memories.
We have to help each other and forgive and understand and have empathy and not carry grudges forever and ever. Generational, one generation after the other. Hates, hates, hates. He touched me. Oh, my God, he touched me. And therefore he touched me and he's dead. He's dead. And
so even if there was the incestuous touch, you think the family should
I don't
still
know
stay
what
together?
Incestuous touch is.
Well,
I mean, intercourse,
touch
if somebody
in a-
comes into your bedroom and forces himself on you, that's one thing. If he
What if
what? I had an uncle, my sister says, used to fondle her. Yeah, he'd hold a newspaper like this and he'd fondle her. Okay, he's dead. Don't ever speak to him again, he's dead. He made a terrible mistake.
so even fondling, you think?
Say, get out of here, Uncle Irving, leave me alone, and walk
So
away.
you think the little kid should be responsible to do that?
I think at a certain point, if it's uncomfortable, they should speak up for themselves and be responsible for themselves, not carry a grudge from century to
But
century.
if there was sexual touch, do you think the family should still stay together?
Of course.
Even if there was sexual
Absolutely. Yes. I don't think sexual touch is the horror of all horrors. I don't think so. I think we make a big to-do about nothing.
How did the child sexual abuse affect you?
I don't know. I mean, I don't pin anything on it.
You don't know of any way it affected you?
I don't. Nope.
I read you told you were afraid you were pregnant.
That's just because I didn't know. I was like naive and.
Or did you not know how sex?
No, I didn't know.
Oh, so you
I
didn't-
just thought maybe, you know, he left some sperm somewhere, and you know, or whatever, and maybe then when you turn 13, that's when it kicks in and makes you pregnant.
Oh.
Yeah, she testified for my father in the lawsuit in which I sued my parents and won.
In the case, Lynn Crook, the part that McNally includes is that she testified that her father said, "Keep your legs together," but the full quote is, "Keep your legs together or I'll think you want me," which is, I consider, extremely inappropriate. But he only quoted that first part of it, making it seem like there was no evidence. But, you know, if a father really does say that to a daughter, to me that is evidence that he is not appropriate sexually.
Well, I don't know whether it means he did anything, but as far as the accusations of Lynn Crook, I think they're extremely dubious.
How do you feel about Dr. Loftus?
Oh, I think that I think she designed a defense for people who were facing civil charges. They needed a defense back in 1991. She discovered one. She created it for them. She created the research to back it up, and that's where she is. And she gets paid a ton of money to do it. And no one fact checks anything she says.
Yeah, yeah.
And she's very, very good with the media.
Do you ever get mad at her?
Oh, I think I used to, especially after she falsified my case to the media.
Yeah.
Yeah, that shocked me. After you take your case to court and you say all this personal stuff about yourself, you win the case and someone lies about your case to the media. I mean, it's just dumb.
Yeah.
Really, she thought she could do that to me.
Yeah.
And so that's why I filed the ethics complaint. Really, you can't do that.
You really can't. I mean, you can't. Yeah, you can't lie.
You can't lie.
Yeah. I went to my childhood home. It was brand new when we moved in. I was in first grade. My sister Ruth was in third. We thought it was huge. We played hide and seek here. We'd always been close. Ruth was the only one from my childhood I could trust. This was the last home she ever lived in. Ruth died of brain cancer at age 11. I was 9 years old. Oh, there she is. Ruth Ramsey dies after illness. This is the first time I've seen this obituary. I was disinherited, but I should still get things like this. As is usual, the funeral home employee picked up Ruth's body at the hospital, but instead of taking it to the funeral home, he took it to our childhood church. Outside the church, before the sun came up, my parents made me watch as they cut Ruth's body with a knife. Later that day, I went to my sister's closed casket funeral. There was a ritual outside the church where they made me hold a knife, where they cut her body. And what I remember is touching her hair because she was still my sister.
So why did your parents do that to your sister's body?
There's never a way for someone who's not evil to explain an evil person's mind. But what was similar that had happened before is, this is before I started kindergarten, my dad killed our dog. He made me and my sister watch while he killed our dog with a knife. And he said that if you tell about the abuse, the same thing will happen to you.
Yes.
So then my sister dies of an illness, but she dies. And afterwards, they cut her body with a knife. And I think it was to threaten me because I know what I know happened after that was my dad started coming into my room a lot more often. Why did my parents do this to me?
I'm supposed to have an answer. It's hard to believe someone would do that to anybody, their child or anybody. I've come to believe in my old age that some people just are evil. I never believed that when I was younger, but I'm beginning to believe it.
Born evil or because of how they were treated?
I don't know. I have no idea.
I just can't believe people are born evil. I just think there's such purity in children. I decided to go to the cemetery and to the place where it happened to my sister's body. I made biscuits for the crew with my mom's recipe. I wrote a story about my angel connection with her. A grumpy old lady dies and becomes a cute little 8-year-old angel. I used to think of my father as an infant, like most rapists. I started thinking of him as a little older, 4 or 5. That's how old he was when a female babysitter molested him. You know, you can't talk to an infant, but you can to a 5-year-old. I had some things to say to him. So I called the minister at my childhood church and asked if he would be on camera. I told him I was molested by a church leader in addition to my father. You want to know the tone of the conversation, and said it'd be a tone just like I'm having with you right now. I mean, it's just a part of my healing. Maybe you could tell me some Bible verses that come to mind and what Christ thought or what Christ thinks about child abuse. And I'd go back and forth what Christ thought, what Christ thinks. I do consider myself a Christian, but my childhood church wouldn't consider me a Christian because I don't have the same beliefs I did then. It was a very conservative church. I was afraid when I didn't hear from him that there'd be like attorneys waiting for us there saying, you can't come on church property, but I don't know how much is my fear because, I mean, I was abused by church leaders, and so it's the church leaders who have the decision making on whether or not I, can film in the church. But the church leaders who abused me are deceased. The minister refused to be in the documentary, but gave his permission for us to film on church property. I entered the place where it happened to my sister's body. In this place, among the same trees, I was comforted. remember when we used to play. Ruth, it has been 50 years since you died. I thought I'd be sad doing this today, but I'm not. You know, my life turned out good. And I love you, but I don't spend a lot of time missing you. I know this won't keep it, but I want to leave it and I don't want it to get rained on right away. Everything went perfect today, but I was right by I did just doesn't work. I'm going to take your picture home. Bye, Dad. Bye, Mom. Ruth, I'll come back to see you sometime. Have you read this book?
No, I haven't.
I recommend it. Okay. It's good. It talks about the connection between mind and body.
Okay.
And yeah,
I've heard good things about it.
Yeah, I'd heard things about it, and then I read it, and I thought, this is who I want to interview. And then I found out he was doing a conference in Portland. What does it mean, the body keeps score?
We are our bodies. Our head is only 1/7 of our whole organism, and our frontal lobe, where we have any thoughts, is only 1/4 of that. The function of the brain is to take care of the body. And so when you get traumatized, everything in your survival brain, which is like about half of your brain, gets set to be worried about survival. And that's all expressed in bodily sensations and stuff. What became very clear from all sorts of research is that the less you're allowed to talk about it, the more the memory goes underground and the more it gets replayed in people's bodies. First World War people write about it, then somebody, a whole group of people, studied the British Army after the evacuation of Dunkirk in 1940, and they find that 1/3 of the people block out their memories and are in a daze, and they write it up in medical journals, and that is like, everybody knows that. And then when incest survivors say, this happened to me too, people say, no, it happens to soldiers, but it doesn't happen to you.
Do you think that people just don't want to look at something that bad as incest?
Oh, no, it's not that. It's that certain people don't want to look at that. The army didn't want to look at the memory loss in the First World War. And so in 1917, on June 16th, the British General Staff says, you're not allowed to use the word shell shock anymore because it will undermine the morale of the war and people will no longer want to fight. So if it's not politically convenient, people are not allowed to talk about it. You cannot study people being raped in the laboratory because we cannot rape people in the laboratory. I'm not interested in Dr. Loftus and her research. I'm a trauma specialist. She's a laboratory specialist. As a scientist, the only people whose work is interesting to me are people who can clarify how people process the memory of extreme experiences. She happens to be not one of them.
You tell about a study you did of 105 women in drug treatment that about 50% were sexually abused.
That was a study of women who were in outpatient treatment for substance abuse, and It was being done by a psychiatrist. So I talked her into putting some memory questions into her survey with these women. We asked them to tell us, the status of their memory. Which of these statements is closest to you? I always remembered, even if I didn't talk about it. I remembered parts of the abuse, but maybe not all of it. I forgot for a period of time, and then the memory came back.
And there were like 9% who
It was something
forgot.
like 17 or 18%, depending on whether you count missing data or not, who said, I forgot for a period of time, and then the memory came back. But we don't know what, in the end, we don't know what they meant by that.
I think in general, people who were abused as children either heal from it, or they use that experience propels them to hurt other people. And with Dr. Loftus, what I think the most reasonable explanation for an intelligent woman ignoring not only the neuroscientific research that's out now, but her own survey study that showed that 18% of child sexual abuse survivors in the study had delayed recall. The explanation I can find is she was affected by her own childhood hurt. And unlike my parents, she doesn't hurt children, but she has made life hell for a lot of survivors of childhood sexual abuse.
People used to say, people like Dr. Velikoff are able to implant complex memories of satanic ritual abuse in people's minds. And I go like, wow, I wish I could do that.
Very powerful.
I'm still struggling with the notion that I can implant a notion in my patient's mind that I'm safe, that I'm to be trusted, and I won't rape them. And that takes me about 3 years to get them to be there.
Yes.
So this implantation of false memory, it's all nonsense.
In 1991, People magazine did 3 cover stories on recovered memories. By then, you had 24 states had allowed victims to sue based on recovered memories. There were probably thousands of people in the U.S. who were concerned about a defense for these lawsuits. And so Loftus was out there tossing out ideas to the media. Were these sexual fantasies? Daughters were dreaming about fantasizing about their husbands,
their fathers,
about their fathers. What were all these things about? Certainly, they couldn't be about sexual abuse. So finally, she came up with a story. Well, it must be therapists implanting, suggesting ideas to their clients, and that became the defense. It first made a headline in August 1991 in the Washington Post. That became their defense. Before then, they had nothing.
So do you think satanic ritual abuse happens to children?
Sadly, it does. Sadly, it does.
I personally don't believe in Satan. I know a lot of people, I know there are people who do. I was raised in a fundamentalist church that did. I went to a counselor a long time ago, and I said, well, but you don't believe in Satan. How can you believe my memories of satanic ritual abuse? She said, I believe there are evil people who gather and do horrible things to children. And, she didn't feel like she had to believe in Satan. And that's where I'm at now. I don't know if my parents did it to worship Satan. I just know what they did to me. And it may have just been to make child pornography. I know they had cameras. My dad had excellent camera equipment, especially considering that we didn't live in that nice of a house when I was real little. He used a closet as a dark room. He had professional lights. It's just so cruel and horrible. I mean, that really would be considered ritualistic, what they did to my sister's body. They made me take off my panties and put hers on that were on her deceased body. I think people think that child pornography is not that, people don't know what child porn really is. I mean, if you think of it like you have this child who's otherwise treated well and just asked to take their clothes off and you snap a picture. There's a lot more. I mean, that is child pornography. Absolutely, that's child pornography. But it can get a lot more involved than that.
Quite a lot of my patients clearly were horrendously sexually abused. And they continue to be preoccupied with, this couldn't have possibly happened. Nobody could do this to a little kid. This is too horrendous. This cannot happen. Every night we see news on TV about ISIS beheading people, doing terrible people, and it can happen over there, but this stuff couldn't have possibly have happened to me. If you work with traumatized people, you deal with these complex issues of memory. That is our field of people who suddenly retrieve a little bit, and they say, no, I must be crazy to remember this, because nobody wants to remember this. Nobody wants to think that somebody who they loved did this to them. So people say, no, I'm crazy. This didn't happen to me. And more stuff comes to mind. I said, I remember that. I said, no, I'm crazy. What's wrong with me? Let me cut myself in order to forget.
Right.
You know,
right.
that happens all the time.
Right.
And so when you're a clinician who does this work, that's the work you do. And so you help people to feel safe enough to allow themselves to know what they know.
Yes.
And that's what clinical work is about.
That's a good way to say it. Feel safe enough to allow them to know what they know. Yes.
But nobody wants to know. The issue with trauma is that nobody wants to know.
Yeah.
Because a victim doesn't want to know.
That's right.
And doesn't want to know that their own father raped them. They don't want to know that the neighbor molested them, particularly when you're a little kid, because a little kid is, by definition, egocentric. And no kid can say, oh, that's just a horrible person who's doing something bad to me, because the way that the child mind works is like, this is happening to me because I'm a horrible person. And so no kid can tolerate really putting in perspective what they know. And every child who gets attacked, molested, hit, feels like, I am a bad person for this happening to me. And so it becomes a shameful secret from yourself. I had a patient who knew that her father molested her as a kid. And then she needed a babysitter. And she was so eager to believe that her father loved her and that she had a false memory, that she had her father babysit her kids. And her father molested her kids. See, that's I think that this whole false memory stuff doesn't work. We are programmed to love our parents.
We are, yeah.
And what I see in my traumatized patients, they love their parents. Despite the fact that they did terrible things to them. They still want to love their parents. And so when people actually come to the conclusion, my parents aren't safe, and my parents are going to hurt my kids, that takes an enormous amount of courage and persistence to overcome our natural tendency to go like, the world's a wonderful place, and my parents really love me. People who have been traumatized live on average 10 years shorter than other people. They tend to have multiple illnesses. Why is that? Because the stress hormones that have to do with the trauma get stuck, and your whole body stays in this defensive mode, fighting an unseen enemy, while your mind is fighting like crazy to say, no, you're crazy, this didn't happen to you. But your primitive part of your brain is not capable of these complex manipulations of your mind. And so your body feels in danger and causes all these illnesses. So every piece of research on chronically traumatized people shows that they all have physical problems, they all have major problems with hormones, because the denial of what happened keeps that whole stress hormonal system running.
My chronic pain was so bad that some days I just wished I wouldn't have a long life. I mean, really, you know, I never thought about suicide, but it was hard for me to think of living to an old age. And now I want to live to be about 100 years old.
For me, as a doctor, that's a bigger story than the false memory stuff.
Yeah, I can see.
The fact that you became the owner of your body.
Yes.
And that you regained a sense of power and agency in your body, I go like, yeah.
What happened during that interview was totally unexpected, because he could tell something I couldn't tell about why I was doing this project. He said to me, you know, why is it that you're going around talking to these people? And I said, well, it's for my project. No, But he's like, he could tell there was a deeper psychological thing, and he was right.
I don't need to be over-interpretive, but this notion of trying to find authority to validate your internal experience is like, oh yeah, we need to deal with that.
Mm-hmm.
Because by now, we need to believe in our own truth.
It was after my interview with him that I thought, why have I been doing this? And that I thought, no one knows that. I mean, I'm an authority on my life. And that has changed my relationship with Jerry, because before it would be so upsetting to me if he disagreed with me about something. And it would be upsetting because I didn't believe me enough.
Yes, I can actually carry on the conversation with you and say I disagree, and you don't either start screaming or crying.
I think it was my not believing myself that kept me connected to my father. And I needed some connection. I needed some kind of connection. I am so glad to be done with the pretense of having you as a father. I just have such a good life without you, and it's always been a life without you, but I just haven't admitted it, and now I am. When I first remembered my abuse, I questioned my memories because I didn't want them to be real. I re-examined my memories because I didn't want to spend the rest of my life believing something that was false. Am I crazy? No, I'm not. Are my memories true? Yes, I'm certain of it. How have I changed?
You're more confident, you're more healthy, you don't get sad as much.
Yeah, and I'm just not as afraid. Did you notice me being afraid a lot early on?
Yes. I think you were afraid of me.
Yeah.
You weren't sure of me, but I think
wasn't.
you're becoming more sure of me.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
Just because I'm still here 7 years later.
Love does heal.
It does.
You know,
it really
and
does.
If you can open your heart to a new person and say, oh, this is what it's like to be loved.
Yes.
Somebody who cares about my safety. That's the miracle of life. And people can find their way out. It's an enormously expensive and arduous journey.
It is.
But I know many people like you who have made that journey
Yes.
and come out on the other side.
When I went and interviewed her, her story was so incredibly moving, and all of the other details of the story that I did not know, that reached far back into her childhood, was so overwhelming to me that I almost could not receive it. And I told her that. And I gave her so much credit because she has so much courage. And that woman is Mary Knight.
This word means so much to me. When I was a kid, my abuser said, if you tell, horrible things will happen to you. I told, and I'm getting this awesome award in front of a room full of people.